So, good evening, friends. Epiphany greetings to you and welcome to Faith in Democracy, Facing the Challenges of 2026. I'm Michelle Dunn. I'm the Executive Director of Franciscan Action Network, also known as FAN. Now, FAN has been organizing an event every year since the first anniversary of the January 6th, 2021 insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. But for a moment, I want to go back to that day itself, to January 6th, because I was in downtown Washington, D.C. During the demonstrations that were taking place that day. I was there with a small local group of peacekeepers called the DC Peace Team. And we were trying to engage with the thousands of people who were there at the pro-Trump rally to persuade them to express themselves peacefully. Well, we were not very successful at that, but we did learn a lot by engaging with and listening to the protesters. And most of them sincerely believed the misinformation about the 2020 elections. One of my fellow peacekeepers said to me, who's going to tell them? Like, who can tell them the truth about what has happened? In other words, who are the credible messengers? I thought about that a lot. And on the first anniversary of the insurrection, FAN held our first interfaith prayer vigil on the anniversary, and we called it Healing the Wound. We asked a series of faith leaders to bring words of truth, healing, and unity to American society to try to heal this wound of January 6th. Well, 5 years later, people of faith need to do this work now more than ever. I think you can see that the wound of January 6th has not been healed, and the threats to American democracy are as great or greater than ever. And if you looked at the news today and you saw some of the things that happened in Washington today on this 5th anniversary of January 6th, you can see the wound is far from healed. As Franciscans, we believe in resolving political differences non-violently. And one of the important ways we have to do that in the United States is through our democratic process, through free, fair, and representative elections, as well as through the exercise of our civil liberties. We can see how important it is that Americans can freely choose and change their leaders through our democratic process, because the decisions of those leaders are so consequential for all of us living in the United States and for people around the world. This week, for example, people in Venezuela. So my colleagues and I at FAN believe that people of faith have important roles to play as credible messengers of support for democracy. And the fact that you've joined this webinar means that you're at least willing to consider that proposition, which we're going to be discussing in detail for the rest of this hour. So here's what's going to happen over the hour. We will be blessed with an opening prayer by Bishop John Stowe, followed by a panel discussion moderated by Chris Crawford of Interfaith Alliance, and including as panelists Rabbi Sharon Brous, Ms. Gloria Purvis, and Reverend Jim Wallis. You'll have an opportunity to ask our panelists questions, so take a moment to check out the Q&A function, okay? It's probably at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see that there you are able to submit a question in writing. You can do that at any point during the program. You don't have to wait until the Q&A period. So whenever a question for the panelists occurs to you, please go ahead and put it in, and then those questions will be brought up when the discussion, when we get to the Q&A portion of the program. After the panel and the Q&A, we will have a closing prayer by Imam Talib Sharif of Masjid Muhammad in Washington, D.C., and then a beautiful closing song by Serena Partridge. So now I invite you to settle in comfortably, get ready for our panel discussion, but before that, take a deep breath and join me as we listen to His Eminence Bishop John Stowe, a conventual Franciscan friar and Bishop of Lexington, Kentucky, as he leads our opening prayer.
God of our ancestors, God who holds our future. We come together tonight mindful of tragic events 5 years ago that have shaken our belief in our homeland, our belief in our goodness, our belief in what our nation is all about. We gather tonight as faithful disciples who love our nation, who love its ideals, who can criticize it when necessary, who can challenge it when important, and who strive to be patriotic in the best sense of the word. Even if our noble ideals are imperfect, we long to make our republic better, our democracy more representative, and our desire for the common good more profound. We come together with more than a bit of outrage over what has affected us all these 5 years ago. We think about the desecration of the Capitol, the symbol of a people striving to govern itself. We think about the breaking of long traditions of the peaceful transfer of power. And we mourn the violence that affected this central shrine of our democracy. Now, 5 years later, we experience even more the aims of those who were destructive that day, as we see people being held against their will only because they have tried to escape poverty and violence in a homeland. Even as we see the violent who desecrated this place go free, and drug makers and kingpins going free, and even the most hardened criminals being given another chance. At this time, we see diversity, equity, and inclusion ridiculed and suppressed. We see voting rights trampled and ignored. We see a disrespect among brothers and sisters that know better and can do better. We see our nation committing war crimes and not being held accountable for its activities in the Caribbean or in Gaza or in so many other places. Lord, as we come together tonight, we know that our democracy is threatened, it is tested, it has been abused, but we come to strengthen our belief in it because we know that participatory democracy is the best way to promote the common good for all, the best way to honor the human dignity which all people made in your image and likeness share, the best way to promote the value of freedom which allows all people to flourish and our faith to flourish as well. Be with us as we recall what happened 5 years ago. Be with us as we resolve to not allow this to happen again. Be with us as we strive to be good citizens, promoters of democracy, and faithful to your word. Amen. Brothers and sisters, I'm Bishop John Stowe, the Bishop of Lexington, Kentucky, and the Bishop President of Pax Christi USA. I applaud you for gathering tonight in prayer all across the nation. Let's open our hearts to God's message of nonviolence. Let's find a way to stand together and resist the tendencies and trends that are so destructive and so threatening to us. Let's make sure to stand with all the vulnerable at this time. And let's not give in to the mannerisms of violence. Let's not give in to the negativity around us, but rise above all that. May the God of all peace fill your hearts with his goodness. May he bless you and keep you close to himself. May he strengthen you to be a witness for others. And may he help us make this nation truly indivisible with liberty and justice for all. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
We're so grateful for Bishop Stowe's beautiful opening prayer there. I'm Chris Crawford. I'm your moderator for the evening. I'm the Senior Director of Civic Strategies at Interfaith America, and I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. I echo Bishop Stowe's excitement for the fact that there are people from all around the country. I've really enjoyed looking in the chat at where you all are joining us from. I'm honored to be with this wonderful panel, including Rabbi Sharon Brous from IKAR, a congregation in Los Angeles, Gloria Purvis from the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown University, and another person from Georgetown University, Jim Wallis, who runs the Faith and Justice Center there. Since we've covered Georgetown, I have to say I'm a Notre Dame graduate. Go Irish before we get started. Thank you all for joining. I don't want to take too long, and you just had a wonderful introduction, so we're going to just jump right into questions. And we're hoping that these questions can, and the answers to these questions can give us a sense of where we are, but also give us all some agency about what we can do at this moment as people of faith. And so, Rabbi Sharon, I want to start with you, and I'll ask this question of all the panelists, but starting with you, Rabbi, why do you think people of faith need to support democracy in 2026?
First of all, it's really a great honor to be with all of you today, and just to connect on this terrible day. And I remember it well, as we all do, and I remember experiencing the moment not only in the present, but also thinking about all of the generations that came before who held such great dreams for American democracy, witnessing this moment happening, and then thinking forward to the future of how much damage would be done and what it would take in order for us to heal from this. I, like many of you, I carried around Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, multiple copies in my bag everywhere I went, starting in 2016. And there's one line that I just want to lift up as we begin our conversation today, in which he says that the hero of a David Lodge novel says that you don't know when you make love for the last time that you are making love for the last time. Voting is like that too. And I think about that all the time and how much we take for granted so many people in this country, the rights and the privileges that many have held here, and what it means to watch them be eviscerated before our very eyes, obviously targeting first and foremost those who are most vulnerable on the front line. But nobody will be spared in the days ahead. And it's absolutely essential that our religious leaders stand up as moral leaders and fight not only for the least of these, not only for those who are standing on the front lines, but really fight for the democracy itself, which ultimately is designed to protect every one of us and must be fully realized. So I'm very pleased that you've invited together faith leaders in particular in this moment, because we've got to do a better job. We have to come together more strongly and continuously in order to push back against the tide of darkness that is really upon our country in this moment.
Thank you so much. Before I hand it to Gloria, I do want to mention, it looks like some of you have already found the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We are inviting you all to ask questions throughout the programming tonight, and staff from FAN will be monitoring that, and we'll switch to question and answer at the end, taking your questions from there. So we invite you at any time as a question comes up, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And Gloria, I'll repeat the question for you of why do you think people of faith need to support democracy in 2026?
Well, I think we should support democracy, not just in 2026, but we should have been supporting it the whole time. I think, first of all, we are citizens and we have that right. And I also think we have an obligation as people who care about the least of us, who care about everyone being at the table, everyone having a voice, which to me, everyone having a voice is another example of our belief that each person is worthy of dignity and respect. We will listen to their voice, and they should, as far as I'm concerned, exercise that power. I mean, in a democracy, right, we express our political power either directly or through elected representatives. In our case, it's mostly elected representatives. And these people have the ability to completely reshape our society, right? We're talking about, in some cases, you can vote for judges, you vote for lawmakers, you vote for the people who are implementing laws. If we want our society to be structured in a more just way, I believe we have a moral obligation to vote. And also, I keep thinking of Pope Paul VI. If you want peace, work for justice. I think voting is an act of justice.
I love that. Thank you very much, Gloria. And Jim Wallis, why do you think people of faith need to support our democracy in 2026 and always?
Well, it's a blessing to be part of this panel, and I'm glad that it's a multi-faith event. When this happened 5 years ago at the Capitol, what struck me was January 6th in my Christian tradition is also a day of Epiphany. It's the beginning of a whole season. And there are these magi from the East coming to try and find this baby Jesus under a star they saw in the sky. And when the ruler Herod found out about this, the text said he was disturbed. He was disturbed. He felt threatened. And they found the child and they decided not to tell Herod where the child was. If you go through all the places right now where authoritarian, and let's add the word imperial rule is taking place, there is always a faith factor. There is always a kind of false religion, what the Hebrew scriptures call the court prophets, the false prophets who support authoritarian, now imperial rule. But there are also another faith factor, those who rose up because of their faith. And that's happening now. Christian, Jewish, Muslim, we're rising up because of our faith. And there will be two faith factors in play. One supporting this threat to our democratic project, but the other that will stand up for the sake of Genesis 1:26, that we're all made in the image and likeness of God. That's the best text for voting rights I can think of. And we have to show the faith factor, and this panel is a part of that, is crucial for protecting democracy. And it is protecting the common good, as Michelle said, but it's really protecting the image of God. This kind of political authoritarianism is literally, and voter suppression is an assault on the image of God. It's literally that, an assault on the image of God. So they will have their faith factor, and we tonight will have our faith factor. And I want to make our faith factor as strong as possible.
Something I appreciate about what all of you just said, as well as what the bishop said, is there's this through line of democracy as the means of caring for people who are made in the image and likeness of God. And Sharon and Gloria, you both talked about the least of these. And I think that's something powerful that people of faith bring to the democracy conversations. It's not just about institutions or structures. It is ultimately about people. So I appreciate that thread coming through in all of your remarks. The next question I want to ask slightly differently to each of you, but as we look back at the last 5 years, we're facing many challenges, and some are the same, almost exactly the same as they were 5 years ago. Some are different, but I want to ask from your areas of expertise what some of the challenges are that you're seeing. And Gloria, I want to start with you because you've written and spoken about the challenges we're facing, particularly in our Catholic community that you and I are a part of. And I wonder if you want to just talk a little bit about those challenges.
Oh yeah, for me, one of the things that has been alarming as a Catholic to see some of our faith leaders praise people who have spoken in plainly, to say it, extremely racist ways, particularly regarding Black people. So much so now that our country, I believe, has an appetite for rolling back our hard-won civil rights that, from the Civil Rights Act, for the Voting Rights Act. I mean, they praised people who said the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a mistake. And I always thought to myself, when I look at the old films of all the abuses and all the horrors that were happening in our society as Black people were trying to basically get a chance to exercise their constitutional rights, I kept saying, how could our society have allowed that? How could people of goodwill have allowed that? Well, I'm seeing it now. They're comfortable with where they are. They're not impacted by it. They have been fed a bunch of lies that will make them more hostile to justice. And they also are seduced by political power. They want to be with the people in power rather than standing with the poor and the people on the margins. And to me, that says they're not standing where Jesus is. And that's a very big problem, I think. And for some reason, our church, at least in the United States, if I may say so, in my opinion, has not been able to clearly identify racism. And one of the biggest missed opportunities our church has had recently in the United States is when the FBI was following these violent extremists who were going to Catholic churches and then getting in the OCIA and becoming Catholic and reaching out to the diocese, various dioceses, and say, hey, we'd like to help you recognize these the signs of extremism. And that got taken and twisted into the FBI is profiling Catholics and they're violating our religious liberty. And that exactly wasn't it. And I realized they saw it that way because they aren't the ones that are under threat by the kind of violent extremism that these people represented. And furthermore, it should say to us, what are we failing to convey during the catechetical process? Because if we were conveying the fullness of what we believe, those kind of people should have been repulsed by it and left. But instead, they were quite comfortable in too many of our parishes. That is deeply concerning to me.
Thank you very much, Gloria. And I can hear the pain in your voice as you're talking about this. And I want to just ask a quick follow-up of, we have this rich resource of Catholic social teaching that a lot of people across faith traditions root some of their activism in and find inspiration from that. And we also have, I think a lot of lay Catholics need to recognize their own power more. And I'm wondering just what resources do we have in the Catholic tradition that can help us to address some of these challenges?
I mean, if they would just read scripture, part of it is reading scripture, obviously, to me, leaning into our Catholic social teaching is so beautiful. It's the way in which we live out the very things that we value. And also, I would say, do not get your catechism from some dude on the internet. Actually open it, read the catechism yourself. I think you also need to try to form your conscience properly. Because to me, I'm like, how can you listen to such poison and not be repulsed by it? Something's wrong. And so I also would say the sacraments are a great aid to clarifying the mind as well. So those are the very basic things. You don't need to go to graduate school, but these are just the basic things you need to do. And by the way, also go serve those who are the least among us. Mm-hmm. Humble yourself. That helps too.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Sharon, one of the challenges we face at this moment is trying to build the coalitions that we need right now. What insight do you have into that challenge of trying to bring people together around a shared vision?
I think the way that tyranny has always worked throughout history is that tyranny thrives when people are isolated from one another, when various communities are pitted against each other, and we believe that we cannot fight together for a just future that we all need and that we all deserve. And that's exactly what's happening right now. I think at the heart of this is a profound epidemic of loneliness that is so widespread across the country, and that the administration is frankly taking advantage of, which is right out of the playbook. Hannah Arendt said, in the 20th century political philosopher, said that impotence and isolation are hallmarks of every tyrannical regime, that we have to not know each other. We have to not know our neighbors. And before COVID, I remember reading a study that said that a third of Americans don't know the names of their neighbors to the person who lives just north of them, just south of them. We don't even know their names. So we're completely isolated from each other. And when we're in that period of isolation and extreme loneliness, there's nothing to do with our grief other than to let the grief penetrate the fullness of our own hearts and to believe that our pain is the only pain. And this is exactly the perfect ecosystem for conspiracy theories and binary thinking and us them thinking to really thrive. So what we have to do is we have to actively counter that instinct by reaching out, even when every part of my heart tells me that I have to entrench in my own home or my own community, that the people outside of my community don't see me, don't understand me, don't recognize my pain, to understand that we're all in pain and to reach out and build a coalition together so that we can effectively respond to the great threats and dangers of our time. And it's completely counterinstinctual. It always has been, but it is particularly now. I think that social media and smartphones have exacerbated this trend. Those devices that are ostensibly designed to help us connect with each other and in many ways do a beautiful job connecting us to each other, but also because of the algorithm make us feel further and further apart. So what we have to recognize is that we're all responsible for one another. That if you fundamentally believe that every human being is created in the image of the Holy One, that every single life has dignity, then we are each other's responsibility. And so we have to stand together to respond to the threats that we're all facing.
Thank you so much. And Jim, you're a convener and a strategist of multiple different coalitions. I wonder if you have anything to add about the challenges you're seeing in our democracy and what it takes to build the coalitions to change course.
Well, I agree with Gloria that it's time to read the Bible again. And my evangelical tradition would certainly say that. I also agree that this is more than just politics. I would say it's a battle between every nation has its better angels and its worst demons. Better angels and worst demons. And our demons of race, our demons of racism run very deep in America. And they're being invoked now. Our demons of race are being invoked to divide us and make us hate each other and even to justify violence. So it is a rollback of civil rights deliberately going on now, but this is really a betrayal. I went to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home over the holidays with some family, and the contradictions in that place are quite amazing, and how our ideals are one thing and our practice is something else. That's always been true of this nation and still is. And now we have a president who really engineered a coup 5 years ago, a coup to overturn an election. And I don't think, I remember hearing at the time, people would say, the first coups aren't always successful, but the next one kind of is. Well, the coup continues. The same person, the same ruler who wanted to do a coup that day is still doing a coup. And the question is, who will stand up to that, not in the name of Democrat, Republican, left, right political parties, but in the name of the authentic gospel. And I love it how the least of these gets mentioned on these calls every time. That was my conversion text that brought me from being a secular activist. I'm the oldest one on this call, way back in the 1960s, to being, for me, a follower of Jesus, because he said, I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was naked, I was a stranger. The word means immigrant there, refugee. I was sick, I was in prison. As you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. There's a Matthew 25 movement growing around the country at detention and deportation centers. And there are pastors and priests and rabbis and imams surrounding those places with their presence and their pastoral care. And I love talking to the Archbishop of Miami, and he told me how they went to the Everglades Alcatraz on their motorbikes. I said, Bishop, you went on a motorbike? He said, yeah, it keeps my head clear to ride my Harley. So here's the Archbishop driving up with his Harley to those places. So I think when people see people of faith, and they're clearly people of faith, showing up at detention centers to surround the stranger with their love and care, and even to disrupt cruel enforcement, I think that really gives a witness to faith in our time.
I really appreciate that, Jim. And I want to ask a follow-up question because you've invoked scripture numerous times. You quoted Genesis earlier, and you just quoted the Gospel of Matthew. I think a lot of people who are on calls like this, when we try to bring our faith into the public square, we sometimes get pushback or questions of faith and democracy. Those things might not go together because faith is an imposition, that we have a separation of church and state. How do we try to balance bringing our values to the public square while not having it be an imposition? And how do we respect everyone's religious freedom while also holding true to our truth claims and our values?
Great question, Chris. The separation of church and state does not require the segregation of moral and religious values from public life. Dr. King, a mentor for many of us, he believed in the separation of church and state, but he famously held his Bible in one hand and the Constitution in the other hand, and he brought his faith to bear on public life. So I think bringing our faith, our moral values, this is for people of faith, people who are, like a lot of students at Georgetown that I teach, they're none of the aboves. That's their affiliation. They're not anti-religion. They're just not willing to affiliate with religion because of what religion is saying and doing. But they're open to something, the spirituality, to God. And I love how they respond so deeply when they see faith being put into action. That brings them as young people back to considering faith again when they see faith in action.
Thank you. I want to invite Gloria or Rabbi Sharon, if you have anything you want to add on that.
Oh, yeah, I hear that. I've heard that argument so many times, like, don't force your faith on me. And I was like, we all are motivated by what our belief system, what our values are. And I also often remind people that without the abolition movement, the civil rights movement had a Christian ethos. Those were absolutely faith-based movements. And so it is strange to me to hear people tell me you should not bring your full self to vote. You know, you should not participate in the public square. And I'm like, but I'm a citizen just as much as you are, whatever our beliefs are. And I have a right, and I think a moral obligation to participate because I want to have a say in building a nation that is for the flourishing of all. I'll just say it like that.
Thank you. Rabbi?
Yeah, I think this is a criticism that is predominantly hurled at people on the left, at progressive faith leaders, that we are told to keep our faith out of politics, that we're not supposed to preach politics from the pulpit. And you know, when you hear clergy on the right in far more egregious and explicit ways, including just direct endorsement of candidates from the pulpit, and those same people won't criticize them doing so. But look, my response is that as a Jew, my most sacred text is the Torah. The Torah is a fundamentally political document. It tells the story of a people who were enslaved for hundreds of years to a tyrant, and then in partnership with God, began what Mandela called the long walk to freedom. You know, the took 40 years to get to the promised land, and 4 of the 5 books of the Torah are dedicated to telling that story. And the charge to that group of formerly enslaved people was to go and build a society that would stand in counter testimony to the dominant norms of Egypt, which was a place of great oppression and persecution. And that is fundamentally what we are called to do as people of faith. And so to leave that narrative behind, to fail to apply those moral lessons to contemporary times, to my mind, is to abandon our most sacred responsibilities. So I think there's a false line that's drawn between religion and politics. Our faith calls us to live from love, to see one another as images of the divine, to see the interconnectedness between all human beings. And those are both spiritual messages, but those are also deeply political messages. And imagine if we could actually build a society in which we were able to operationalize those core foundational faith assumptions about human dignity, about the need for every person to live in dignity. That would necessarily be a society in which racism is anathema, in which all forms of discrimination and bigotry and hatred are simply anathema, if we actually honored that every person was created as an image of the divine.
Adding a sentence to that, there is a secular fundamentalism on the left that is as irrational and mistaken as the religious fundamentalism on the right that I fought my whole life. And the rabbi's right. Our faith is political, but in a much deeper way than partisan politics.
Mm.
And what we see a lot in Catholic communities that I've gone to churches with all different types of sort of political cores among their membership is that there's also different ideas of everyone wants us to hear about the gospel and not politics in church. But what they think of as gospel and what they think of as politics is inverse. And I used to love going to church in Chevy Chase, Maryland, where Father Percival Silva, in a very wealthy DC neighborhood with a lot of elected officials and Supreme Court justices and whatnot in the audience, would preach the full gospel, full Catholic social teaching. And you could watch as half of the group would cross their arms as he made one point, and then he'd get to the next point, they'd uncross and would be nodding their heads, and everyone would switch. It was kind of funny. One question left, and I want to remind folks on the call that there's the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen. It looks like we have about 50 questions, which is wonderful. So we're going to turn to those in a minute. In just a minute or two each, I want to move us toward, if not hope, at least action toward hope. And I'm wondering, what is the vision that you would like to put forward for our democracy and some of the actions that people can take? I know that's a lot for a quick answer. And Jim, I see you're off mute, so why don't you go ahead first?
Okay. Back to protecting the vulnerable. That's key to everything in Hebrew and Christian and Muslim scriptures. Second, telling the truth. Truth telling is going to be absolutely essential here. And Jesus says, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So the opposite of the truth is not just lies, it's captivity. It's captivity. Truth and freedom are indivisible. And I think those are scriptures, but they're also actions. So when people see people of faith defending the vulnerable, just defending the vulnerable, it really draws people back to faith. And when they say seeking the truth, and not just being peace lovers or peacekeepers, which can just justify the status quo, but peacemakers, entering the conflict on behalf of those who are targeted with violence. I think those kind of actions this could be an opportunity for the renewal of faith. If those of us who say the things we're saying on this call act on those things and people see us doing that, this could be a chance to renew the faith in this country that we've needed for a long time.
Thank you. I'll go with Rabbi and then Gloria. You can have the last word before we switch to question and answer from the audience.
Well, I have been so moved by something that Father Greg Boyle has been talking about a lot in the last couple of years, which is that it is each of our responsibility to make love our home. That we have to make love our home, no matter what is happening outside in the world. And I really believe that part of the challenge of this time for each one of us is to build oases of love and justice. So there's this tremendous sense of powerlessness. If you look at the grand scheme of what's unfolding before us, I mean, what can I do about what transpired over the course of the past couple of days in Venezuela? What can I do about that? And the answer is if we sit in that place of powerlessness, we're letting ourselves off the hook and we're just letting history unfold the way that the tyrants want it to unfold. But what I can do is I can work to build small communities of love and justice. I can work to build Dr. King's vision of the beloved community in the most intimate spaces, knowing that then the beloved community vision can ripple out, and God willing, when we reach out outside of our own smallest communities toward one another, we can help fuel a kind of transformation so that that vision of a true multiracial democracy might one day actually come to pass in this country. I don't think that hope is something you either have or don't have. I think hope is something that you muster every single day by doing the work, by living in the work, by choosing love, by choosing justice, by choosing to speak out and tell the truth, by letting yourself grieve when you experience losses, and by letting yourself experience joy, because joy is going to be the fuel of this movement. So I think that's something, those are choices that every one of us is going to have to make every single day. And we have to remember that we're in this for the long haul. This isn't a sprint, as they say. You know, this really is a marathon. The work is going to be long, and we might not even live to see it come to fruition in our lifetimes.
Thank you. And then Gloria, before we welcome Robert Christian on to moderate the
Yeah.
additional Q&A, go ahead.
Will you sum up the question again? Because I'm thinking more about what sustains me, and I think your question was larger than that.
It's how would you describe a positive vision for democracy, or any resources or actions that you would recommend?
Oh, I think as a believer, we have to remember this isn't our final home. And while we are here, we are free in the most radical way to align ourselves with our brothers and sisters, and also to show our allegiance to God. And so to me, that's very freeing for what we can do. At least for myself, I say what I think is clearly to me unjust, what clearly is a violation of my faith, especially when it comes from people like J.D. Vance, who is the highest politically ranked Catholic in the land, who's given a complete counter witness to the faith. And I'm like, is anybody going to say anything? I was like, okay, well, I'll do it. So we, I think, have a responsibility to do some consciousness raising, to knock people upside the head. Wake up. Do you see what this is? Do you love God? How does your life align with that? Why are you silent in the face of such injustice, in the face of all this deception and corruption? I would think living a life in allegiance to God is one that compels us to combat lies, to seek truth, to speak truth, and to not hold anything back in the pursuit of justice. Justice properly understood as the everybody getting their due, what is due to them. And what that also means, if I have to give something to someone else, means I am always in debt to my neighbor to make sure they get what is due to them, which is a completely different, I think, understanding of how the world should be, at least what I'm seeing so many times in political discussions, regardless of the party, that trouble me. So I want everybody that it believes in God to free themselves of these concerns about politeness, if you will, and go and raise people's consciences, challenge the lie, challenge the enemy among us.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I want to list just a few quick resources before we get into the questions that some of us are affiliated with. One is that there's Faiths United to Save Democracy, which I believe Fan is a member of. Jim Wallis is one of the organizers of. They do help with voting access, recruiting poll chaplains to be a peaceful presence at the polls. The website for Faiths United to Save Democracy is turnoutsunday.com. That's turnoutsunday.com. There's also a wonderful Jewish organization that I wanted to mention, which is a More Perfect Union, which is a Jewish democracy initiative, which is really focused on nonpartisan actions that Jewish people and Jewish institutions can take to support our elections and our democracy. And that's jewishdemocracy.org, jewishdemocracy.org. And then moderator's privilege, I have to mention my own organization, Interfaith America, has its own voting resource and way of getting involved in our elections in really nonpartisan ways, community level ways that align with your values. And that's called the Faith in Elections Playbook from Interfaith America. And after that commercial break, I'll hand it over to Robert.
Thanks so much. I'm Robert Christian, the communications director here at FAN, and I'm so excited that we have such a great audience, and there are so many great questions coming in. I'm going to try to synthesize them and cover as many topics as we can. For the first one, I thought that Rabbi Sharon might get us started. How can people of faith mobilize young people to work on behalf of democracy when so many young people are wary of organized religion?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. When I first became a rabbi in my late 20s, there was a trend across not only the Jewish community, but across religious life in the United States that young people were showing that they had an allergy to institutional religion. And what I discovered, because I was a young person talking to young people about it, was that there was a real antipathy toward religious life. It's true. But what people were upset about was not spiritual practice, not ritual practice, not communities of purpose, not gathering together to celebrate, not gathering together to grieve, not even God. What they objected to was the way that our religious institutions have calcified, have become to embody not courage, but cowardice, that they seem to be stuck in routine and unwilling to embrace a kind of creativity. And so my challenge back to the young people who don't want to be a part of that religious life is I don't want to either. So let's go out and build the kind of communities that we want to be a part of. Let's go manifest the kind of faith commitments that we actually hold, which are creative and are fluid and are courageous and are rooted in a kind of fierce moral clarity. Let's build those religious lives. You won't be the only ones who want it. I can promise that.
Great. A lot of questions are coming in on what people might be able to do beyond just voting. So what other forms of civic involvement can people pursue that would help American democracy in this moment? A lot of people are asking about like nonviolent resistance, creative nonviolence. Jim, would you want to jump in here?
Sure. Sharon, that was a great answer to that question. Thank you. Amen to all of that. I think on my wall here, I've got all these, my heroes of faith. It's my family tree, and they weren't all political winners. In fact, most of them weren't. Jesus wasn't a political winner, but they were faithful. And so that's what it means for me to say, what does it mean to, I'll just say, take a risk for the gospel in a time like this. And I want to distinguish between optimism, which I think is not strong enough, what we need, and hope. Optimism is a feeling or a mood or even a personality type. But Archbishop Desmond Tutu taught me that hope is more a decision, a choice you make, because of this thing that we call faith. So even when there's not optimistic days, and we're going to have a lot of those days when we feel overwhelmed and surrounded, hope, I love the Hebrews text. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And my best paraphrase of that is hope means believing in spite of the evidence and watching the evidence change. And so I think young people, back to what the rabbi was saying, are looking for those choices, those decisions. And I think they want to be where those choices for hope are being made, whether we win or lose politically, which we don't know the answer to yet.
Yeah, Gloria?
So let me add, and everybody, I think your responses were so beautiful. I'm just going to say a few simple things that I think anybody can do. Lobby. Go to your local elected official's office, make an appointment, bring a group of people with you, talk about the issue that's most important to you. I think people underestimate how powerful that is to show up and actually look them in the eye, hold them accountable, tell them why you want this or that, or even propose policies that they should try to enact. We have a lot more power, I think, than we recognize. It's not for the far off office, way off in Washington. What can you do locally right now? And you can do that. You can make those appointments with your local officials, with the be active, maybe run for office, maybe run for the school board. There's much we can do. And you can also organize. You can also organize other people in your sphere, your family, your friends, your church community, to sit down and talk about what's happening. Again, a part of that consciousness raising, and also testify when they have these open hearings on legislation. Go out and testify. I think all of those things are very practical things that any of us can do.
And can I just add one piece to that? I mean, on a spiritual level, we have to make sure we don't harden our own hearts. I mean, this is the way we know how this works. We know how good people end up staying silent because we feel like we tried, we protested, nothing happened, and now I'm just gonna shut down for a couple of years and hope they don't come after me. And this is exactly the wrong response. We have to make sure we do not harden our own hearts, that we continue to feel, that we continue to embody the kinds of compassion and empathy that we want the world to reflect. Otherwise, we're just playing by someone else's rules.
We have a lot of questions coming in about the high levels of polarization, partisanship, and the reluctance of some people to speak out if it's someone on their side that is seemingly threatening democracy. Maybe, Chris, you could jump in here. How can people of faith work together across religious lines and maybe ideological lines, party lines, to strengthen democracy? How can they navigate in such a partisan environment?
Yeah, I think on the first part, I think all of us should tap into our faith identity as an identity that's deeper and stronger than our partisan political identity. And we have a commitment as people of faith to the truth and telling the truth. And one of the frustrations I had in the time around January 6th, 5 years ago, was how many political and faith leaders I heard who were either outright lying about the election results or were accommodating the lies and saying, well, the people in my circle believe this, and so I have to act in a certain way. As people of faith, we have an obligation to the truth. And the way to love your community is to tell them the truth when they have been told a lie. And so I don't know how many times I have said that over the last 5 years, but I get just as fired up every time. But switching gears a little bit to the bridge building piece of it is that as a Catholic, I'm required to love God, love my neighbor, and love my enemy. And if I'm not reaching that bar, I'm not reaching the bar that Jesus has set for me very clearly. And so from a faith perspective, I think it's a great point that Rabbi Sharon made, that we can't harden our hearts and we have to actually love the people that we disagree with. From a more programmatic standpoint, a lot of our work at Interfaith America is focused on bridge building. And my message on bridge building is that I think there's this sense that you're weakening yourself if you're reaching out to other people, and that you are giving something up if you are talking to people who are different from you, and that bridge building is a sort of nice to have thing. When things are going well, you can have these conversations across difference. But what we believe is that we need to be able to take action across lines of difference on the things that we care about. And it's not only just that it's a nice thing, but it makes the work more effective. If you are bringing a group, like Gloria was saying, if you're going to meet with your member of Congress and you sit down with 5 people who look the same and are reliable voters of that person's re-election, you're not going to get as far as if you bring in a multi-faith coalition or you bring in a huge group of people and you say, we have lots of differences. We care about this together. And I'm preaching to the choir a little bit on this, but it's also, I want to kind of weave in an answer to your last question too, of some of what we can do. The political moment that we're in, we are facing such a strategy of us versus them, and people are demoralized by that and the idea that we can't solve problems anymore. And what I've seen through one of our partnerships at Interfaith America is we go locally and work with Catholic Charities, YMCA, and Habitat for Humanity, and they're doing bridge building work to solve problems. And when we can show that we can come together across lines of difference that other people are telling us aren't able to be crossed, and when we can work together on local issues, both through government and through private action to solve problems that we're told can't be solved, that's a form of resisting the throwaway culture and the authoritarian culture that we're seeing. The thing I've been saying a lot is resistance doesn't always have to feel like a fight. It can be coming together to solve problems.
If I can just say one thing also, thank you, Chris, I think that was excellent. I've been thinking about my conversations with so many people in the Black community across faiths. And it has, when Trump was elected, there was a real recognition that we cannot go out in the streets and protest like we used to because they will kill us. Like, seriously, we are under no illusion that our lives matter to this administration. In fact, we feel like if they could get their get back from the summer of so many Black Lives Matter uprisings, that they would. And so there's a different kind of participation and resisting that I'm seeing within the Black community, where you don't see us necessarily involved in peaceful protests, because we know that our presence there might make it not peaceful and also that we could get killed. But there are other ways people are meeting, are actually praying together, are actually trying to keep each other uplifted, are actually trying to say, hey, you're one of those 300,000 women, Black women that lost your job. How can I help you? You know, what resources can we pool? So there are a lot of different ways that people are going to be involved. And I'm just being very frank with you, what I've seen in the community of our analysis of what the actual threat is to us of going out into the street en masse and protesting. So it's not that we don't care, but we recognize it's a different calculus for us.
And I think that point is also exactly why bringing people together across lines of difference is important. Because when we bring people together with different perspectives, I'm learning something as we're sitting here. The 700 people listening are learning something from Gloria that I would have no idea how to provide the knowledge that people need that you just provided. So getting the different perspectives is really valuable. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. That concludes the question and answer portion of the event. I wish we had another hour, and I think with all the questions pouring in, a lot of the people that are watching would agree. I want to thank Gloria Purvis, Jim Wallis, Rabbi Sharon Brous, and Chris Crawford for joining us, and all the people who sent in questions. Please stay tuned in for some announcements and a great closing song. But first, here is the closing prayer from Imam Talib Sharif of the Nation's Mosque in Washington, D.C.
Greetings of peace, and thank you to the organizers, to the panelists, and to all of you, the participating audience, for joining us at this year's Faith and Democracy event. Let us pray. With Almighty God's name, the merciful, the eternal, the source of all life, the same God for all of us, who created us all from the wombs of our mothers and cares about us all equally, just like a mother. We come to the close of this gathering grateful for this moment of reflection, dialogue, and shared responsibility. We are thankful for the diversity of faiths, traditions, and perspectives represented here, united by a shared concern for the soul of our democracy and the dignity of every human being. While we thank you for the blessing of freedom, we were reminded this evening that the freedom we cherish is a trust, and that every trust calls for integrity, restraint, truthfulness, and moral awareness. And likewise, on this day, in light of the lessons of our recent history, we remember that democracy is not self-sustaining, and like faith, it is a work in progress. It depends upon moral courage and ethical leadership, and it grows stronger when people choose conscience over impulse, understanding over anger, truth above fear, and service over self-interest. Help us to mature as a nation and as a community, learning from our failures and strengthening what is good and just. Awaken in us a deeper reverence for human dignity. Guard us against the misuse of power, the distortion of truth, and the temptation to divide what you created to live together intelligently. Bless those entrusted with public responsibility to have integrity, restraint, humility, moral conscience, and a deep sense of accountability to the people they serve. Protect the vulnerable, uplift the marginalized, and awaken in us a renewed commitment to fairness, participation, and the rule of law. Remind us that the diversity among people is not a weakness, but a sign meant to lead us to understand, not fear, and to compete not in hostility, but in works that promote the common good. Guide faith communities to be steady lights in uncertain times, teaching responsibility along with rights, to model compassion without compromise, to speak truth with love, and to act as guardians of both freedom and responsibility. Let our faith be seen not merely in what we profess, but in how we care for the future we are shaping together. As we leave this gathering and move into the challenges of this year and beyond, grant us clarity of purpose, shared commitment to protect human dignity, a renewed sense of stewardship for this nation, and a democracy worthy of future generations. Let what we have shared here move from dialogue to action, from reflection to resolve. May we be instruments of healing in a divided nation and builders of trust where it has been broken. We offer this prayer in humility and hope, placing our trust in you, knowing that sincere effort in the work of justice, when guided by faith, unity of conscience, and moral awareness, is never lost and is never in vain. Amen.
Thank you so much, Imam Sharif. And thank you to our panelists, Sharon Brous, Chris Crawford, Gloria Purvis, Jim Wallis, for an amazing discussion. Many thanks to my colleagues, Robert Christian, Claire Fisher, and Rosie Davila, for their hard work on this event. I want to thank all our co-sponsoring organizations who helped to spread the word about this event. There are too many to list, but we're going to show you their names in just a moment. Before we go, I have a question, though. Have we convinced you that people of faith need to speak up and need to act for democracy this year, not just at election time, but starting now? If so, please connect with FAN, with Interfaith America, and our other co-sponsoring organizations, and look for opportunities to do just that. You're going to get some more information on that and a recording of this event in the email that you'll get from us tomorrow. I want to invite you to stay on for just another couple of minutes to listen to an inspirational song that has kept me going for months. It's called In Times Such as These by Serena Partridge. You don't want to miss this song. It's going to warm us as we go out into the cold January night. And I wish you peace and all good.
I ask myself, how can I sing in times such as these? In times such as these. Sometimes I ask myself, how can I sing in times such as these? In times such as these. don't you hear them too? Those voices cutting through the despair, singing, we need you there in the belly of the beast, singing, 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 through times such as these, through times such as these. Sometimes I ask myself, how can I love in times such as these? In times such as these. Sometimes I ask myself, how can I love in times such as these? In times such as these. But don't you hear them? Don't you hear those voices cutting through the despair, singing, we need you there in the belly of the beast, loving, 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 through times such as these, through times such as these. Sometimes I ask myself, how can I hope in times such as these? In times such as these. Sometimes I ask myself, how can I hope in times such as these? In times such as these. But don't you hear them? Don't you hear those voices cutting through the despair, saying, we need you there in the belly of the beast, hoping, 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 through times such as these, through times such as these, in the belly of the beast, loving, 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 through times such as these, through times such as these, in the belly of the beast, singing, 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 through times such as these, through times such as these.